to do now for next 15 minutes is just share a short message with you, and then I'd like to have some ministry time together, if we could, before we break for lunch at 12:30. Is that okay? Yeah. All good? All right, I want to just share a word that I think I love hearing on a regular basis, actually just preparing for this, for today, just so help me again, because I don't think you can ever hear enough. And the message that I want to talk to you about this morning is finding your identity in the grace of God. I can never hear enough about being grace-focused. Can you? And it's just so important that we are people that are living and doing our life from the grace of God. That we primarily identify ourselves in the grace of God, and everything we do is from that place. And Paul said it so well in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 9 to 10. He says, "For I am the least of the apostles, and do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace to me was not without effect. No," he said, "I worked harder than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me." What I want to take out and highlight just there for us is this: by the grace of God, I am what I am. What an amazing statement. Paul's saying, I am what I am. My identity is in the grace of God. Who I am is found in the grace of God. And what he's saying is that I am what I am by the grace of God. I'm not more than what I am outside of the grace of God, and I'm not less than what I am outside of the grace of God. I am. Whatever grace God has placed upon my life as a leader, as a pastor, as a business person, as a Christian, that is where I'm meant to identify myself from. That is my identity. And the problem we all have, and the challenge that we have in the world that we live in, is we don't necessarily identify with the grace of God, but we can tend to identify with our performance. It's more about we get pressured and pushed, especially as leaders in the world that we live in. We get pushed into that performance mode where we identify with our performance, with what we do and how well we do it. But Paul's saying, I'm not identifying with my performance, I'm identifying with the grace of God. That's who I am. And it really is important to understand. I've got a 10-point message to give you in 15, 20 minutes. But I'm going to do that this morning. I'm not going to give you all 10 points, but I'm going to take out the best of it. We're going to take out the nuggets. But I want to explain a little bit about that performance identity mode. Because the reality is we all, believe it or not, do find our identity there more times than not. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, as long as we're doing well. When we're not doing well, when something doesn't go well for us, out of that place, things start to falter. Things start to fall apart on us. Especially, our devotional life. When we're doing that well, we're cruising. We're feeling really good about ourselves. But when we're not doing that so well, and our identity is found in our performance and not in the grace of God, we don't do so well. We all know what it's like to lead our churches. And we all have our goals and we all have our visions as ministers, as leaders, a connect group in business. And we know when everything's going well, we're feeling good about ourselves. When things aren't going so well, we're not. Because our sense of identity is found in our performance. So if we're not content in just doing well, and we've got to do it better, and that's the thing that we all get caught up in, that trap where it's like that carrot of, I've got to do it better. And so we tend to try to work harder. And that better part kicks in. And that's dangerous. It's a bit like the carrot that's on the end of the stick that's in front of the donkey trying to lead him somewhere. You'll never get there. Who knows what that feels like? We've all been there. Because the whole thing about that performance identity mode, it's where we can kick into versus grace identity mode. I'm not saying we don't perform. I'm not saying that we actually don't do well. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that we perform out of the grace of God. We don't perform in spite of the grace of God. Our primary identity is the grace of God, not our performance. And so, because I just want to ask you, I just want you to think about this just for a moment. If what you're doing now, where you are right now in your life, if it doesn't give you any sense of satisfaction, whatever you're doing, whatever area, if it doesn't give you any sense of satisfaction, then that area or that part of your life is in performance mode. You're identifying with performance mode. You hear this said a lot. When I graduate, I'm going to be happy. When I get married, when I make more money, when the church grows, when we buy the building, when we get this new venue, when we start a new congregation, start a new ministry, I'm going to feel good about myself. That's performance identity mode. And there's a key the Bible gives us. And that key is how to stay in the grace of God is humility. Humility is the key. James chapter 4 verse 6 says this, but he gives more grace. Everybody say, he gives more grace. Who wants more grace on their life? Absolutely, we all do. But it goes on and says this. He says, therefore he says, referring to God, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humility is the key to having the grace of God on your life. It takes humility to identify with the grace of God. That was a very humble thing for Paul to say, I am what I am by the grace of God. I am not more and I am not less. I am. Some of us who've got a great grace on our lives in certain areas sometimes like to dumb it down a little bit and say, hey, we're a bit less than that. That's not humility. That's false humility. That's a religious humility. Some of us get pushed into saying, hey, I'm more than the grace of God that's on my life. That's not humility. And that's a danger because you're being driven by something that's not God. And that's when you kick into performance identity mode. And you're out of grace identity mode. So humility is a big key in living and staying in the center of God's grace. And getting more of it. Who knows, we need more and more of God's grace on our life. So humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less. Humility is realizing who you are compared to God. Who you are compared to God. I mean, you think about what Jesus said. He said, he made statements like this. He says, I am nothing. I mean, he's walking in amazing authority. He's got this amazing ministry, great miracles. Crowds are flocking around him. And he's turning around and saying, I am nothing. I am nothing without my Father. I can only do what he tells me to do. And I only do what he tells me to do. I only do what I see him doing, and I only say what I hear him tell me. In other words, my identity is found in the grace of God, not in what I do and how well I do it. Paul said things like, I boast in my weakness, because it's in my weakness that God's strength is found. We've got to realize and get this reality that humility is a big key in getting the grace of God on our lives. Paul says, when I am weak, he is strong. You know, I just recently, I train at a gym 4 times a week. I know I don't look like I train at a gym. I'm not sure how I look, but as in how I'm perceived. But anyway, when I look in the mirror, I see a very skinny man. No, I haven't got an anorexic problem. Just joking. But I train 4 times a week with one of my key leaders, and we've befriended the gym owner, and he's kindly offered to train us. And he obviously must have looked upon us and felt sorry. And so he thought these boys need some help. So he trains with us 4 times a week. And he's a high caliber personal trainer. He's a leader in his field. And he really stretches us. He gets out the best in us. And I've never hit so many ceilings in my training sessions since this guy has trained us. I mean, the first week, 2 weeks of training us, I got 3 injuries. I injured my back twice and my rib once. But pushed through those, and the psychological reality that comes with those, that ceilings develop and fears, pushed through those. But anyway, he keeps stretching us. And one day we were doing legs, and if you know what leg training is, it's not one of my favorite sessions, and most bodybuilders or people that are into training don't find their leg session the favorite session. But we were pushing on a leg press machine. A flat leg press machine was like a simulated squat. And he's asking me to do 2 more. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm done. He says, 2 more. I said, no, I cannot do it. I am done. And he says, I want 2 more. And I said, no, I'm out of here. I'm done. And I said, I refuse to do this 2 more. And anyway, I got haggled a little bit and told to go to the ladies' gym. Sorry, ladies, that wasn't me. They told me to go to the ladies' gym. They felt I didn't qualify for the men's training area. Mind you, there was 200 kilos on this, so it wasn't lightweight. And I walked off and I said there was no way I was going to do that. I was just maxed out and I didn't want to injure myself, and he said, you had 2 more. I said, there's no way I had 2 more. He said, yes, you did. He says, I was right there, so was the other training partner. We were on either side and you had 2 more. Now, you had whatever you had, you give. But what was left, we were going to lift. And it hit me and I thought, oh. He goes, you just didn't trust us. I didn't know they were planning to do that. So next training session, I got this whole reality. This is exactly how it is with God. Next training session, we were doing chest. And I was maxed out, lifting at the end of the workout, heavy weight, maxed out. And he says, 2 more. And I'm like, I got nothing left. But you know what I did have? I think I had 10%. I gave. And that bar just kept going up and up and up. And then it came back down and then went up and up and up. Why? Because all I had was 2%. But they, either side, put in the other 90% and lifted it for me. And that's exactly how it works with the grace of God. When I am weak, He is strong. When Paul said, I boast in my weakness. I am what I am by the grace of God. I am not more, I am not less, I am. And so we need to identify one of the key things that keeps us out of the grace of God. What kept me out from doing those 2 reps, for example, was fear. And it was a lack of faith and a lack of trust in my trainer and my training partner. But it's exactly what we do with God. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6, God tells us that it's our fears, our worries, our anxieties, our cares that actually put us in a place of pride and out from the grace of God. He actually says that very same word in that passage of Scripture. He says this, that God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. The proud he's referring to are the ones that bring their cares and their worries and their fears and their anxieties to God. And he said the devil is roaming around like a lion, seeking to see who he may devour. It's those that are caught outside the grace of God that the devil takes out. They're the ones. We're the ones. And when we're outside of the grace of God, this is where the enemy gets in and gets us to miss the mark. We wonder what sin is. That's really what sin is. It means to miss the mark. And so that is a key. That it's when we're at the end of ourselves, we're in that place of weakness, we're in that place of vulnerability. That's the time not to kick into performance identity mode, but into grace identity mode. You with me? Yeah. Should I give you 2 points? 2 more points. How about that? I'm going to go with the see-through Subang clock and ignore my clock because I've got more time on that clock than this clock. But the first thing that you get, 10 things that can happen to you. I'm not going to give you all 10. I'm just going to give you a few. 10 things that can happen when you exchange performance identity mode for grace identity mode. The first one is this: you're freed from comparison. Paul said, I'm the least of the apostles. He knew his place. He was secure in it. It brings a security. He said, I'm not better than the apostles, but because of God's grace that he's given me, I have a place. I have a ministry. I have a purpose. And I'm secure in that. I don't have to compare myself or compete with anybody else. I just need to stay in my lane. I need to stay in the sweet spot of the grace of God that's on my life. In Galatians 2:7-9, he says, on the contrary, they recognized that I had been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been to the circumcised. For God was at work in Peter as an apostle to be circumcised, was also at work in me as an apostle to the Gentiles. James, Cephas, and John, those esteemed as pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship when they recognized the grace given to me. They agreed that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. There was no competition. It was clear. You're graced for the Gentiles. I'm graced for the circumcised. There's no competition here. And you'd really think, if you looked at both of them, that you'd think, hold on, the other one was qualified for the other. But it wasn't the case. It was the grace of God that qualified them, not their background, their education, their skills, and their experience. It was the grace of God. I believe that God swapped it on those two so they would stay in that position where they were dependent and needing of God and not kick into performance identity mode. Paul didn't compare himself to Peter. Peter didn't compare himself to Paul. Peter says, I have this grace. So comparison results in the feeling of superiority or inferiority. And neither one is good for either one of us. Joyce Meyer said, God will help you be all that you can be, but he will never let you be successful at becoming someone else. No one can be better than you. No one is better than you. You are an original. You know, we hear that saying that when God made you, he broke the mold. It's true. There is no other you. You are the best. You just be the best you that you can be. Have the courage to be yourself and contribute to the world what God's placed on your life because the world needs it. Number 2, you can stop striving. Paul said, I labored, not I, but the grace of God. When you have a sense of identity by God's grace, you realize it's not all up to you and your efforts to make it happen. You're relying on the grace of God. All you need to cooperate with God's plan. And it makes the journey far more enjoyable. Moving towards your destiny, it takes you out of striving. Number 3, you can enjoy living in the now. How many of us carry the idea into our walk with God? He'll be pleased with me when God will never ever love you more than he loves you right now. You with me? Yeah. He's going to love you. You know, you may think, well, if there's a better me, that's when God's going to love me. When I'm telling you, he's not going to love you anymore. Even the better you, the much improved you, the you in 10 years' time that's grown, developed, and stepped into a greater reality of destiny. God's not going to love you more than he loves you right now in 10 years' time or in a year's time. You can enjoy living in the now. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey. 2 Corinthians 1:2, as God's co-workers, we urge you not to receive God's grace in vain. For he says, in the time of my favor I heard you, and in the day of salvation I helped you. I tell you, now is the time of God's favor or God's grace. Now is the day of salvation. Number 4, you can rejoice in the blessing and success of others. Grace has given you a portion and no one can take it from you. When somebody else is getting blessed, it's not a threat to you. Somebody else can get blessed, it's no threat to you. Psalm 16 verses 5-6 says, Lord, You alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. We don't need another church to do bad so that we can do well. You with me? You know, if everybody in Kuala Lumpur got saved, I'm telling you, there ain't enough churches. There ain't enough churches. We do not have to be threatened or concerned. There's more than enough. The harvest is actually greater than the laborers, I'm telling you. The other thing that happens when you identify with grace identity mode versus performance identity mode is this: you pass grace on. Matthew 23 verse 2 to 4 says, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, and they say, so you must be careful to do everything they tell you, but do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on the people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Can I just say this? If you're a legalist, you're going to pass legalism on. Okay? Which, you know, that's the reality. We need to be a people that pass grace on to others. When you're living in performance identity mode, you are under a curse and you can never do enough. You're never able to do enough and will inevitably leave. You will become frustrated, and all you're going to do is you're going to pass on frustration from yourself onto others and those around you. People will drink from your life and from what you've been drinking yourself from. You with me? You know you're not drinking from the well of grace when you're short-tempered, irritable, or frustrated. All right? You know you're not drinking from there. So watch out for anyone when they act like they've got it all together. Okay? Because there's a good chance that they're going to get frustrated at some point and pass on that frustration. Number 6, you can truly fulfill God's purpose for your life. God's purpose for you is not a goal He wants you to reach so that you can present it to Him and say, I did this for you. Do you like me now? You know, I love it when my boys, when they help me wash the car. They grab a sponge and each one grabs a sponge and they go off and they get the soap and they go away washing the car and doing their part, and they come back to me and I'm washing my part. We've finished washing the car and they go, Dad, how good was my part? How good was that? And really their part was horrible. They missed all the dirty spots, cleaned some spots, left a lot more dirty spots, but the reality was Dad cleaned the car. It was me. And the reality is this: that is exactly how it works with God. You give your best, God will do the rest. You need to be in cooperation and relying more on the effort of God than your effort. Performance identity mode says, I've got to do it for God. Grace identity mode says, God is big enough to do it. I just need to cooperate. Do you want me to give you the last 3? Yeah. Really quick summary. You can walk with a new sense of confidence. Hebrews 10:35 says, do not throw away your confidence. It'll be richly rewarded. There is a confidence that comes on you when you know no matter what, you're going to win. Performance identity mode says, I'm trying hard to win. But grace identity mode says, God has taken responsibility for me and I must ultimately win. I'm on the winning team. Number 8, you can enjoy being you. Your unique blend of personality, character traits, experience, perspective, and the lessons that you've learned from the Lord. Grace identity mode accepts all of it, the uniqueness of you. You don't have to be like anyone else, like we said earlier. It doesn't mean you don't stop improving yourself. You don't do that. You know, it's not like you know, thank God I'm just big, fat, and lazy, selfish slob. God made me this way. No. Paul says he actually worked harder. He worked harder. And not because of himself, because of the grace of God. He actually performed harder. He worked harder and did far more out of the grace of God. So it doesn't mean we don't improve. It doesn't mean that we don't develop. It doesn't mean we don't grow. We actually should be improving, growing, and developing far more when we're operating out of the grace identity mode. He said, I am what I am by the grace of God. He says, I'm going to be the best that I can be in God because of the grace of God. That's what he's saying. Number 9, you are free to step out and take chances. Performance identity mode says, don't try it. You might fail, and then you would be a failure. Grace identity mode says, step out in your dream. God considers you worth something, and this is where your worth comes from. Failing doesn't make you a failure. Quitting does. Everything in life is an experiment. Go for it. Step out. Try it. You know, I know great businessmen who these days invest money. Did you know they will not invest money? They look for young, up-and-coming entrepreneurs. And he told me once, this is Peter Daniels, he's from Adelaide in Australia, and I happened to have a chat with him once, and he said to me, when we sit to interview these up-and-coming entrepreneurs, and we want to look for a business to invest our money in, we actually, one of the key questions we ask them, have you failed? Have you experienced failure in business? Have you bankrupted before? And the ones that have failed and bankrupted with a great idea and got the potential are the ones that they invest in. Because they know if they've failed before, they're going to take a lot more care the next time they step out. Failing is not failure. Quitting is. Step out and experiment. If you fail in God, you're not a failure, you're loved. And number 10, you can enjoy your relationship with God. Have you ever had somebody who's never been completely happy with you? Do you ever know anyone that's never been completely happy with you? If you're like me, what do? You avoid them. Don't you? If you always think that God is dissatisfied with you, you avoid him. A lot of Christians have this thinking that God is dissatisfied with them. And so they avoid him. They don't pray. That's probably one of the key things that hinders them from pressing into God in their own personal devotional time. The reality is you probably have more of a sin conscious than a righteousness consciousness. God is always satisfied with us. God loves us and accepts us right now as we are. You can approach him with your good, your bad, and your ugly. He accepts you and receives you as you are. That's the grace identity mode versus the performance identity mode. I want us this morning to make a decision. If there's any area of our life where we have fallen into that trap of the performance identity mode, I want us to make a decision to say, hey God, I missed it there, and quickly realign ourselves back in that area with the grace identity mode. It could be more than one area. It could be one, it could be two, it could be multiple, it doesn't matter. But what I want us to do this morning is to say, like Paul, I am what I am by the grace of God. I am not more than what I am, and I am not less than what I am. I am what I am by the grace of God.